We're in the middle of a menu, and it's a menu of French masterpieces, two, one by RAVEL, one by MASSENET. And the second course of the Food for the Soul menus are the time that we get to introduce a celebrity chef. And today's celebrity chef is this chef of the violin,
wow,
who's sitting next to me.
Never been called that before.
I know. This is.
I got really worried.
But this is this. Yeah. No talking about actual culinary talents, but I'm sure that you're a wonderful cook. Well, she is a wonderful cook of music and of violin. The distinguished concertmaster of the Omaha Symphony, who, since her arrival in Omaha, has had such a wonderful impact on our community, both for the standard of playing that she has brought to the orchestra and to the community, which she very generously shares her talents with. And Susanna Perry Gilmore, who's sitting right next to me, is a distinguished soloist who plays around the country. Among her current gigs are to play in Apollo's Fire as co-concertmaster, a very fine Baroque instrument orchestra out of Cleveland. And also, if you've heard maybe her play the Celtic music, she is a specialist in Celtic, and she created a program called Celtic Journey with musicians from around the country. And that this year they'll be going to Edmonton, Scotland, along with other places.
Edmonton.
Edmonton, Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's not
fine.
Scotland.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So, no, that's just as good.
Yeah.
Although I hope it's going to be a little closer to spring.
Yeah,
in March. It gets really cold there. You never know. So welcome.
Thank you.
Susanna Perry Gilmore. I'm really going to start with a compliment to you, because when I said you've had impact, I really mean it. I feel it and hear it. You have been a marvelous leader, and you have great qualities, and you've really made a difference with the orchestra. And I think they're very lucky. We're all very lucky to have you here in our community.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's very kind.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about music today. The idea of Food for the Soul is to focus a little bit on what does music give us, and what do we get from it. And in doing that, we're talking about things. And first of all, I'd love to talk about the role of the performer, and compare it really to the role of anybody who stands up in front of any group of people and presents something. Great orators, speakers, actors share in common, musicians share in common a couple of key things, goals as to what it is that their purpose. Not to be divisive politically, but the other night Nancy Pelosi, who I happen to admire very much, said these words: find your why. Find your why. Or find your purpose. And how important it is for anybody who's in that position of standing up in front of a group, being a leader, being a performer, has to understand why they're there. And I've done a little too much thinking about it, because I've had a little too much coffee today and had the drive up from Lincoln, and so I thought I would present it in two parts. One of the goals of the why is first to make the audience comfortable, for the purpose of then they will trust you and let you take them somewhere. And that probably is the purpose of anybody who speaks with a group or does anything with a group of people, is to get them to trust you enough to follow along with where you're trying to take them. And so one implies to make them comfortable, you have to be comfortable and be prepared. And so talking about preparation first, and then maybe talking about how one develops the vision as to what in a composition, like the one we're going to play soon, where is it supposed to go and where are you taking them? So I want to talk a little bit about how you prepare to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Hal touched on something really important that is sort of an underlying current behind definitely the performing arts, is that we don't want the listener to be at all concerned. You know, we do want to make it look easy so that you feel free to pay attention to what's important, which is what the composer is trying to say, what the music is trying to say. In my case, that's my art form. I don't do a lot of improvisation, and my primary goal is to communicate to you, communicate to the listener, and be kind of an open transparency to what the composer is asking for. And not to interfere, but to let it through, to be a vessel, to let the music through. An immense amount of preparation goes into this. I mean, and it's continuous. It's not like you reach a certain level when you're 21 and then you can just let it go. You now know how to play X, Y, or Z. It is an athletic act. We have to stay in shape. And like all athletes, we have, peak years physically, and then we have years where maintenance becomes more challenging. I mean, we are very much like athletes, and if we aren't playing at a continuous amount, we have to, like taking a day off can work. Taking 2 days off, maybe. If you take 3 days off, I'm going to hear it in my playing. If I take a week off, you're going to hear it. So, I mean, kind of making that up, but I think that's pretty accurate. I have not gone on a trip anywhere in as long as I can remember where I haven't brought my instrument. Regardless of the purpose of the trip, I need to keep playing constantly.
Part of the sacrifice and the blessing of being a violinist is that you have to always think about your technique, your physical wellness, and like you say, this all sort of starts with at the level of being physical, and then from there, like any performer, you're hoping to bring out the next level of things, and not just show the physical. And then the pieces we're going to play today, one of them is a popular and piece that you've probably known for many years of your life, and a lyrical piece, and the other one is a piece that was intended to be fiendishly difficult, as the composer said. I'm going to make it fiendishly difficult, the most difficult thing I could possibly write, which is what we're going to talk about. You
did a pretty good job.
Well, we'll get to that, because we're going to start with the lyrical piece. But so Massenet, who wrote the Meditation, which is part of an opera. It was an unusual situation because it's part of one of his many operas, and he is one of the great French opera composers of the late 19th century. He lived well into the 20th century. One of his pieces, Thais, was a piece about a courtesan who, in operatic fashions, the most famous courtesan, the most desirable woman in all of Egypt, right? And you think about Cleopatra, right, and all of that, and then in the middle of the story, a monk starts to appeal to her to change her ways, and she rejects him at first, but then she has a dream. And in this dream, which is the 5 minutes of the piece that we're going to play, she has a complete transformation, and then welcomes the monk and starts listening to him, and ultimately ends the opera in a convent. So that's what I call operatic, right? Courtesan to nun.
And it's not what people probably are aware of when they request this to be played at their weddings.
No, that's right. So this is the piece that, how old were you when you first started to work on it? Were you 10?
I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those pieces.
Early on. You can encounter it on student recitals early on in your career, and play it with the piano. Mm-hmm. And so it can grow on you, but it's sort of an excerpted piece, and you know it because the melody is beautiful and very familiar, and it's a wonderful opportunity to sort of bask in the beauty of the violin, and so you're going to have that experience shortly. But So getting back to our part two, so now we are in this sort of developing that vision of where you want to take the audience. And let's just think about that piece in particular for now. And what are some of the thoughts that you have about the meditation in terms of what are your goals and what do you hope will happen?
I think that with this piece, Massenet creates this beautiful canvas. You'll hear, I mean, Hal plays it beautifully with the piano, but when I perform this with the Omaha Symphony in 2 weeks, I mean, there's a lot of harp and there's like the shimmering string sound. So there's this background of, it's like this, like you're looking at a lake with mist and it's just very atmospheric. And then this most beautiful soaring melody sort of comes from nowhere. And it's an opportunity for the violin to do what it can do best, which is to be vocal. I mean, to sing. The violin sings. And I have continuously, throughout my whole life, taken inspiration from the human voice, and I believe that that's what composers are aiming for when they have violins play, when they have string instruments play. When I'm playing, I'm reacting to the harmonic changes, you know, the new colors, the new instruments that come in, the new phrases, where their breaths, where the music starts moving, and I don't know if Hal mentioned this yet, but the form of this meditation is in three. There's an A section and a B section, which is new music, and then a return of the A section. By the time you've gone through the journey of the middle section, where a lot of different things happen, and you return to that opening, we're all different people. We've gone on a journey with the composer. And, you know, for me, I'm somebody, perhaps Hal and some of you are this way, music is a language that I have always intuitively understood. I just have, since I was really, really, really little. I am analytical to the extent that I'm trying to make good musical decisions, but a lot of it is intuitive. I'm reactive to the harmony that's going on.
And in particular, as describing the form, and maybe taking it a step further into how the experience of that musical form can translate into a more personal form. In other words, a more experiential form. Is that you start with music that establishes a kind of, like you were saying, a kind of a vision of a very beautiful world, right? And the melody establishes that. And that A section stays true to that. It grows, but it's a kind of a statement. And then the next section comes in, the B section, and things start to change and transform. And that can translate very easily into the whole idea of change, which is, I think, one of the fundamental things that human beings understand. And in fact, if it didn't change, it would become less interesting. And so it's part of it is to create that thing that draws us and takes us somewhere new. The B section of this piece explores, looking at it from the character's point of view, a little more turbulence, a little bit more of a conflict between things, not just the blissful peace of the A section. So that after you've experienced the B, then when you return to the A, it's not the old A, it's a new A. It's a new thing because of where you've come. And that, in a sort of very, in a short, compact way, is, I think, a metaphor for a lot of things in life and a lot of ways in which art works. We can connect to them. And what is the ultimate goal? Is to see ourselves, to see something that we recognize, perhaps to see a better part or a better world that we would like to see come about. Many different possibilities as we, are affected by a piece of music.
I think that just the human condition makes that work because we are never the same person. I mean, like we are the same, but we have, you know, we have this cumulative experience. So, you know, when I played this piece, let's say 8 years ago, I did not have the last 8 years of experiences. So it has new meaning to me now and today. And just like when you listen to a piece again, those of you who are coming this weekend to the first of these. So I'm playing this on a festival that the Omaha Symphony is presenting this week and next week, and it's Russian and French and American tales is the idea. So, and all of the repertoire has some narrative components and are just really extraordinary showcases for the orchestra. And totally forgot where I was going with that.
Well, okay, well, you're
oh no, so I know what I was going to say.
Coming this weekend,
yeah,
right?
So, like, I mean, right. This weekend we're playing Stravinsky's Firebird. Like, how many of you have heard that before, right? You're going to experience it completely differently this weekend than any other time you've played it before because you are different, and all of us on stage are different that night because what we do exists in the moment and then it's gone. It's different every time. So I think that was my point.
That's
okay.
A great point too.
Okay.
I really. What do you think about playing?
I love to play.
Yes.
Okay.
that was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so different because of you all being here. Because we just did it a half hour ago, and I was totally unfocused, and I think I was a little more focused, and you played so beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to accompany you. Just one thing I was thinking about is what it is to be a concertmaster. And at one point in the piece that we just played, which you can't really hear with the piano version, is that you are in a very familiar territory, because you're playing a line that the other 12 or so first violins are playing with you, and you're leading them, and they are kind of keying in on you as the leader of the whole orchestra, but also of their section. And so you'll be part concertmaster in this as you play as the soloist. I guess it's just to talk a little bit about, for you, how does it feel to be, what's the difference for you and the experience of being with your orchestra, but now as a featured soloist, as opposed to being in your normal role as concertmaster?
Yeah, it's definitely a different role to be the soloist. It's, again, a different role to be a soloist in a totally different orchestra than your regular orchestra. But it's such a privilege to be able to play with my colleagues here in Omaha. And they're an extremely supportive group of people, and they're just phenomenal. When you're playing a solo part, though, you're generally not concerned with blending. You are trying to project your voice and project and completely lead the musical intent of the piece. In my role as concertmaster, I view my role more as a lightning rod. Like I'm absorbing the musical intent of the conductor, who's right here, and projecting that energy all around to the people behind me and the people all around me in the orchestra. Particularly for string players in the symphony, if you think about it, the string players are the one section of the orchestra where you'll have 14 people playing in unison, right? The winds and the brass and the percussion are generally more solo individual parts. So one of the key roles of the concertmaster and the other string principals is to play in a demonstrative way and with how we use our bow and what we're doing, so that the string players can see how we use our bow and play in the same fashion. So the string players are getting a lot of information from watching the leaders of the section that the conductor can't show. The conductor's very busy doing a lot of other things, all the other instruments, and can't show how he or she wants the bow to be used. So that's just one example that's happening in. So I guess sometimes, since we've been using different performance analogies, sometimes I feel as concertmaster that I am like maybe a lead actor in a play, and also in charge of some stage direction, and also performing at the same time. So I'm trying to analyze and make decisions and figure out how to improve the situation while also currently saying my lines.
Right,
right.
A player coach.
A player coach.
Right?
Right.
In basketball, it would be like I can't think of who it was it Bill Russell or somebody?
Yeah.
Being a player coach, that's an interesting role.
Particularly in rehearsals, this is happening. And hopefully, after doing that in rehearsals, then we get to the moment of performance and I can just play.
Right. You do your work a lot.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit, though, because of the role of the soloist. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think is so wonderful about concertos, besides the fact that we get to experience the accomplished virtuosity of a soloist, and that's a big, I think, sort of in a big way, we are attracted to that. We admire it. we're amazed by it, we're wowed by it, but we also can relate to that soloist in a way that we can't relate to the whole orchestra, because you can't see all those individuals at once. They are a kind of society. And that soloist standing there is a kind of a representative. And a protagonist, to use your play analogy, a kind of the lead hero in our play, who has something to say that may or may not be in sync with what the group says. You know, sometimes it's soloist versus orchestra. That's part of what the tension of a concerto is, that you have a different, you have one against the many, and it's kind of an interesting thing to see who's going to come out on top, and hopefully everybody does. But so that kind of leads us to this, to our next piece, which is the virtuosic piece that I said Maurice Ravel wrote in 1923 with the idea after he was inspired at a London party. French composer, lived in outside of Paris, in London, heard this young 29-year-old Hungarian violinist, who I'm going to just say, because otherwise I'm going to not say it right. I'm going to say her name was Jelly, because I'm sure that's not how she pronounced it. What?
Probably, yeah. I'm not sure, but I think it's Hungarian.
Yeli. Okay, Yeli Daranyi. And she was an accomplished violinist and Hungarian. And she must have been something special, because Bartók and Vaughan Williams wrote pieces for her as well. But Ravel was taken with her, and he said to her, I'm going to write a piece for you, right? And he went back and he studied, and he studied Liszt Hungarian Rhapsodies and Paganini Caprices, and he got everything in his head about what he could do with the violin and Hungarianness, because she also played for him lots of native things from Hungary. And so we have this TZIGANE, which we're going to perform, and you're going to perform in 2 weeks. That's a good story. Does it affect your outlook of this piece that it was originally written for a woman?
You know, I had not focused on it until you mentioned it, and I'm actually delighted to know that, because in Eastern Europe, the music of the Roma, the Gypsy culture, and of the folk music of non-Gypsy culture, like the Magyars in Hungary, it's so interlaced and so interwoven, and it's hard to tell where one tradition started and the other, went on. But when I think of, TZIGANE and a gypsy, I think of, testosterone, and I think of, a certain sort of style. But to know that he was actually inspired by a woman, it gives a whole different possibility to what he wrote. But composers have been sort of gleefully ripping off this idea of the zingarese, the gypsy music, because it's such visceral, earthy, joyful, and sometimes startling music. And Haydn did it. Renaissance composers did it. It's a long, long tradition of it. What's so wonderful about Ravel's TZIGANE is that he writes so colorfully for the instrument. I personally think, it's like a gypsy TZIGANE on, steroids. In Technicolor. It's like no one could have possibly dreamt up. Yeah. Perhaps. It is so, and he writes so much detail that he creates freedom, which is a paradox. But he writes so much detail to try to create this feeling of an improvisation that happens. And what he does is he ultimately releases the player into this free area. So what you'll hear is there's a long cadenza. Like the first, I don't know if the piece is, 10 minutes?
10 minutes, and half of it is the cadenza.
Half of it is a cadenza.
Not at the end, where it sometimes, or most often is, right?
So it's a cadenza, right. And this person has a lot to say. I know from my studies of other Hungarian music, because this piece was written for a Hungarian violinist, it has this, the Hungarian language always, the inflection is always on the first syllable, always. You'll hear it, and a lot of Slavic languages as well, but in this is Hungarian as a... So it's very rhetorical, it's very spoken. There's a spoken rhythm inside the music.
Plays wonderfully into the idea of violinist as protagonist or violinist as character, as a person, right, that has something to say. Ravel is hard to play. He's a very technical and challenging composer. He has vivid imagination. So even I'm not playing anywhere near as difficult a part as she has, but it was really fun.
Thank you, Hal.
Oh, well, we some of us got together for the first course a couple of weeks ago, and we listened to quite a few people playing TZIGANE, and we watched videos, and it was very interesting. It was fun, but there's nothing like being in the presence of it, and I think that that's the key. Is that, you know, and I'm looking at some of you who were there, and I know that as I was talking about it, it was a lot less interesting for you than what just happened, because I said, talking about how difficult it was and how blah, blah, blah it was, but when you actually see the physical act and you see the amount of accomplishment, that is one of the things that's really exciting about this particular art form. And there's counterparts in all art forms, but there's nothing quite like musical virtuosity. Just to see somebody who has reached that level of encountering so much difficulty and mastering it. And that's really what the pleasure is of all of this. It really does feed our souls, just to go back to my favorite theme.
And I think it's why people come to concerts. I mean, I think that's why there is,
Right.
and that listening to your favorite CD of a Brahms symphony in your car is wonderful. It really is wonderful. I'm glad we can do that. But then it is very different from viscerally feeling, I mean, seeing the physicality of it and the experience of being in the room when it's just happening like that one time is very different.
I had a question.
Yes, please.
How often is the violin used as a percussion instrument the way it is so much? Is this breaking from tradition wildly, or are there other composers that have experimented with all those percussive kinds of
Sounds.
sounds? Yeah.
It was definitely written at a time where composers were hearing, like the world had drastically altered by the 1920s. I mean, if you think about what happened in Europe in terms of, I mean, like by the time you got through the Industrial Revolution and then into the wars and everything, I mean, like the sounds of the world had shifted. So I think the sounds that composers were asking of their instruments started to shift as well. That's how I would explain it. I mean,
Sure.
I would say it's more of an evolution than a break, but it was an evolution that was in tandem with the environment in which people were living. It's my theory anyway.
But just in general, in this piece, I've sort of noticed particularly, you know, you're a solo instrument, and you would think that your job is primarily to provide melody of all the musical elements. You're providing melody. Yeah. But in this piece, and not to say that that's all that violin ever does, but in this piece, it's really vividly, you are kind of a one-man band. I mean, you're providing the rhythmic underneath, the melody and the harmony all at once. And what I'm doing is just sort of like filling in a little bit of an outline. The violin, the virtuosity is asking the violinist to be everything.
Yeah,
it's the ultimate multitask.
It is.
Right?
It's a bit of a circus too. I mean, it's like,
Yeah,
okay, well
right.
now what's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
You got to
I'm
keep
gonna
coming
play,
up.
I'm going to play Bomb My Back now. You know,
Yeah,
it's a little bit
keep
like
coming up with stuff. Yeah, that's right. You got to keep on coming because it's 10 minutes, but you're watching something new happening almost every couple of seconds.
Or
right?
imagine
Yeah.
like you're a I'm sorry if it's not a PC term, but I mean that he would have said a gypsy violinist on
Right.
the street playing, and you're playing for tips, and you're trying to keep their attention so that they stay and they give you money at the end. I mean, you are trying to keep people from walking away by, oh, now look what I'm doing. So there's a bit of that.
I love that. So there's two kinds of music. There's eyes closed music and there's eyes open music, right? So that's sort of like the life, right? You're awake or you're asleep. Yeah. You're living in dreams or you're living in some sort of stimulation. Anyway, cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, well, the thing that plagues me personally, and I'm having challenges today, for whatever reason, is cold hands. And cold hands make it a little harder to play fast, to just move quickly. So these are just a fleece, and I wear them, and they do help warm me up. And so much women's clothing, does not really cover up to the wrists. And so these sort of my solution.
And other things that you do to keep yourself?
Well, so I got myself up, which is not normal. I mean, I woke up before 7 this morning, and I did some aerobic physical exercise, and then I did stretches, and I really wanted to be physically awake for performing at noon. So I had to think backwards, because if I just did my normal routine and had an afternoon or an evening rehearsal, I would have been fine. But I mean, this is on the early side for the night owl musician. So, but I find things like that actually really help me now. Like I can't just, launch into playing this without being warmed up. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just want to say how glad I am that your dad is here today.
I am glad my dad is here too. Hi, Dad.
This has been delightful. I want to just mention to you that we have 2 more menus coming up. This menu isn't finished because the third course is on Saturday, January 19th at 7:30 when these pieces will be performed with Susanna and the orchestra. But our last two menus of the season are really interesting. One is with the Blue Barn Theater, and it's their upcoming production of Indecent, a remarkable play by Paula Vogel. We'll be looking into that piece. It's a play with extraordinary amount of music, so that's going to be part of our discovery. We're going to have Susan Clement-Tober here, and then we will obviously be going to one of the early performances of the Indecent. The last menu is The Legends of Faust, and the story that's many, many centuries old, and the age-old archetypal thing is what would a man sell his soul to the devil for? And so there's lots to talk about there. It was kind of where I first started getting my idea for this series. And we will be working with Opera Omaha and having a visit by their dramaturg for their production of Faust, which is part of their spring festival. So anyway, please, I hope that you'll tell people about us and come back. And Susanna, I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been to have you, and thank you so much.
Thank you.